Howdy, y'all. Lasha Hawksworth here with another episode of Redneck Lesbian, the show that reassures you that all the best people go to hell, so enjoy the company. It occurred to me recently that we take a lot of weird shit for granted. There is a cigarette lighter port in my van that doesn't have a cigarette lighter in it. That's because nowadays many people use the thing to charge their phone or whatever, which is definitely a departure from the original purpose. And then I thought, why were there ever cigarette lighters in cars? It's not necessary to operate the vehicle. It's clearly an add-on. And of all the add-ons that the engineers could have put in a car, they chose that one. They chose it. The government had to mandate seatbelts and airbags before car companies did anything, but they voluntarily put cigarette lighters in cars. Now, I know that 90% of the population smoked back in the day, but I'm pretty sure that a large majority of the population also drank coffee, but I don't see a coffee maker in there. I'm also pretty sure that large numbers of people have fucked in cars, but I don't see a condom dispenser, pillows, or anything remotely resembling a decent space for that, unless you have a station wagon with a folding back seat. I can just see the engineers discussing new features, though. Damn it, man, I had to drive 10 minutes to our office the other day, and I had no way to light a cigarette. This will not stand. Then they added the fold-out ashtray, even though no smoker has ever used one, preferring to flick their still smoldering butts outside the window of the car, setting fire to roadway medians and the kids trapped in the back seat who had the misfortune to have open windows at that exact moment. You can definitely see what we prioritize as a society by how we design things. Cigarette lighters? Check. Life-saving devices like seatbelts and airbags? Only if the government makes us. Really, cars would probably have the full cocktail cabinet that you see in the backs of limousines and movies if it weren't for the fact that drunk driving is already a problem and, well, lawsuits. You can buy about 5,000 different cell phone accessories for your car too, which is probably why they're pushing self-driving cars so much. Because clearly driving is taking too much time away from Facebook. Nothing that humans make has a natural or predetermined design. We create what we prioritize, and we should think about that when we're looking to lay out our dollars. Sure, Keurig coffee makers are convenient, but at what cost? Is convenience really worth trashing the planet? According to the story of stuff, the amount of K-cups trashed into landfills as of today could wrap around the planet more than 10 times. More broadly, almost 25% of American homes owned a single cup brewing machine. That's over 75 million homes brewing single-use pods like K-cups every day, multiple times a day. Bad design choices normalize bad things. Remember that when someone comes out with a backpack with a holder for a Glock. And one more thing, can we as a nation find some middle ground between COVID is a hoax and we're all going to die? All right, now let's talk about genealogy. It's a common meme to assume that redneck family trees don't have as many branches as they should. And I'm here to say that that analysis is spot on, based on my own research. I started this project after having kids and realizing that if I didn't write shit down, I would lose it. The family tree contains the kind of knowledge that my mother would rattle off at will. Do you remember so-and-so? Invariably, I'd say, no. And she'd say, well, he's so-and-so's second cousin twice removed. There was a lot of family tree information in her head. I assume all those branches are why she had trouble holding anything really useful, like facts. Once I started digging into my genealogy, many interesting facts and stories come to life. For example, If I go back far enough, 400 to 500 years, some of my forebears in what is now the United Kingdom tend to be, on average, more well-to-do. There are more than a few knights, mayors of London, and various well-to-do landholders, or at least upper-class folks, from Wales to Surrey to the Scottish Highlands to Ulster. We are cousins of kings, both Stuart and Plantagenet, and the children of Norman, Scottish, Welsh, and English aristocrats. These nobles probably wouldn't recognize the hillbillies that I grew up with, which shows you just how far fruit can fall from the tree. Well, except maybe for our McGregor cousins who were literally outlawed by the crown for slaughtering a bunch of Campbells. Still, it shows you that when wealthy families have a dozen children and their children have a dozen children and so forth, some of those kids are going to come up short in the wealth department. There can only be one heir to an estate. Women can be married off, but younger sons will inevitably come up poorer than the ones before them. These are the folks who set sail for the American colony. Some of them started off well enough, but eventually a fair number of them ended up living in hollers with an outhouse. Speaking of the McGregors, their clan motto is "Royal is my race." It's obvious to me that a lot of white Americans with roots in the old country still believe this, even though most of them are many generations removed from any pretense of royalty. Yes, they seem to think, we may not have a pot to pee in and only one turnip for the pot, but our 12th great granddaddy was an earl, and don't you forget it. In addition to having so-called noble roots, there is a large amount of overlap between multiple sides of my family tree. Yeah, I may be related to that fella there on my mother's side, but apparently I'm also related to him on my father's side. There are many examples of this kind of familial overlap, which indicates just how inbred white people with United Kingdom origins really are. When I had our DNA tests done as a family, I also discovered that I shared relatives with the sperm donor's family, which makes us distant cousins. So not only are many white heirs of the American Revolution kind of inbred, there are millions of us with delusions of grandeur. It is precisely this grandiose view of ourselves that makes white Americans so good at oppressing minorities. If every redneck thinks they're a nobleman with a mislaid title, then somebody has to be available to mop the floors. In the old country, that somebody was a white peasant who was essentially a member of another race entirely. For the Normans, the peasants were the Anglo-Saxons. To the Anglo-Saxons, the peasants were the Celts and the Picts. Of course, the Anglo-Saxons and the Celts and Picts had their own royalty, so all of this was highly subjective. Naturally, the discovery of people with dark skin who could be conscripted into service, was a real boon and greatly simplified things. We finally watched the HBO series Lovecraft Country, which only has one season because the white executives at HBO discovered there were limits to their wokeness. Black people could be angry at white people? They could overpower and usurp white people's magic? Hey, homeboys, that is a bridge too far. We did not intend to bankroll that. We're canceling your ass. If you haven't seen the show, white people belong to a secret society of magic called the Order of the Ancient Dawn, which is undoubtedly a reference to the real-life Order of the Golden Dawn. This magical order, which included Aleister Crowley and William Butler Yeats, was one of several societies that pursued magic and power and glamorized that particular European strain of racism and misogyny that we all know and hate. Unlike our European pagan predecessors, the goddess was an unimportant nonentity to these folks, and their cults focused on patriarchy and dominance of the white male. The point of these societies in real life and in Lovecraft Country is that white men think they're the only magicians. They believe that they are the most powerful beings alive and that women and minorities do not have access to the same power. Basically, these people don't share and don't think they need to. Of course, every human being has access to magic and all of it is powerful. What's interesting about white people is that we are terrific spellcasters. We are so good at it, in fact, that we have deluded ourselves with our own spell of superiority. We truly believe our own bullshit, and attempts to lower the veil, so to speak, have not been successful. I think the reason is that other magic is at work in the world, and rather than acknowledge it, white people just want to keep pretending that we're the only magicians around. I see this all the time. There's that low whisper that we use when we know we're discussing a subject that's just between us white folks. It usually involves the sort of commentary that would get people canceled on Twitter. This is usually followed by an uncomfortable laugh. It's the white method of reinforcing the spell of, we're all on the same side here, right? It's why white people watch Fox News. Whether it's a dog whistle or just an outright racist comment from Tucker Carlson, it's a redrawing of the pentagram and an invocation to ensure that white remains mighty. HBO canceled Lovecraft Country for the same reason that Youngkin won Virginia. It talked way too much about the injustices done to Black people, which is things we'd rather forget. Then it ended by breaking Whitey's spell. Lord have mercy. No wonder white people are so mad about critical race theory. So, to my people, stop reinforcing this stupid illusion. I promise you the world won't end. And if you're scared, just know that those Black and brown people won't eat you. Honestly, they haven't done it yet, and one could argue they'd be justified if they did. So chill the fuck out and learn something new. Evolve. Consider that life doesn't have to be a zero-sum competition. Wouldn't that be a nice change? Thank y'all very much for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you next time.